Hello, Virgo. Thanks for being here today. Hmm. Distance has been doing something you didn't expect. And the person you stepped back from is finally feeling the full weight of your absence in ways they couldn't when you were still available, when you were still reaching, when you were still there making it easy for them to take you for granted. But now that you've pulled back, now that the space you used to occupy is empty, they're discovering what it actually feels like to not have access to you. And that discovery is changing everything. Your absence is speaking louder than your presence ever could. This isn't about playing games or manipulating someone through withdrawal. This is about what happens naturally when someone who's been giving and giving and giving finally stops, when someone who's been accommodating and patient and understanding finally creates boundaries, when someone who's been pouring energy into a connection that wasn't being reciprocated finally redirects that energy back toward themselves. And the shift that creates, the vacuum that forms where your attention used to be, it's forcing this person to confront things they've been able to avoid as long as you were still engaged. Some of you might have stepped back out of exhaustion, not as strategy, but as survival. You just couldn't keep doing it anymore. Couldn't keep being the one who cared more, tried harder, reached first, and in that stepping back and that choosing yourself when choosing them was costing you too much. You accidentally triggered the exact wake-up call they needed, but nothing else could provide. Um, there is a sense that this person has been operating under certain assumptions, that you'd always be there, that your feelings for them were stable and unchanging regardless of how they treated you, that they could take their time figuring out what they wanted because you weren't going anywhere. And those assumptions, while they remained unchallenged, allowed them to stay comfortable in their indecision, in their half commitment, in their taking without giving back. Um, but your absence has shattered those assumptions. It's introduced uncertainty where there was complacency. It's created the possibility that they might actually lose you. And that possibility, that threat of real loss, it's doing what all your words and efforts and explanations couldn't do. It's making them pay attention. It's making them feel, it's making them realize what they've been risking by not showing up for you the way you've been showing up for them. This reflection invites you to consider, how does it feel to know that your absence created more impact than your presence? And what does that tell you about this dynamic? Um, it's possible this person is experiencing your withdrawal as rejection. And maybe part of it is, maybe you did get tired of being treated as optional. Maybe you did reach a point where their lack of effort or clarity or commitment became intolerable. Maybe you did decide that being alone felt better than being with someone who made you feel alone. And if that's true, if your stepping back was partly about protecting yourself from further disappointment is less than #0, 5# is greater than, that's valid. That's not manipulation. That's self-preservation. But what's interesting is how they're responding to that perceived rejection. Not with relief, not with indifference, not with the ease of someone who didn't actually care that much anyway, but with panic, with regret, with sudden clarity about what they're losing, with motivation to finally do the things they should have been doing all along. And watching someone scramble to keep what they were taking for granted It reveals the truth about how much you actually mattered, how much they actually cared, even when their behavior suggested otherwise. There's something powerful about watching someone realize your value only after you've withdrawn it. On one hand, it's validating. It confirms that you weren't crazy for believing the connection mattered, that your feelings weren't one-sided, that what you sensed beneath their avoidance or ambivalence or distance was real. They did care. They do want you. They just didn't know how much until the option of having you was no longer guaranteed. It can seem as if your absence has become a mirror, forcing them to see what they've been too distracted or defended or comfortable to see when you were still present. And what they're seeing in that mirror, what your absence is revealing about their own feelings and fears and patterns, it's uncomfortable enough to finally motivate change, to finally make them question the walls they've been hiding behind, to finally make them wonder if protecting themselves is worth losing you. Some of you might be noticing shifts in how this person is showing up. More texts, more calls, more attempts to engage you, more visibility in your spaces, more questions about what you're doing and who you're with, more intensity in their energy when they do interact with you. And all of this, all of these changes, they're evidence that your absence is working, that the space you created is having the effect you maybe hoped it would, but didn't quite believe was possible. But here's where it gets complicated, because now you have to decide what you do with this information. Do you let them back in? Do you maintain your boundaries? Do you require proof that the change is real and sustainable before you soften? Do you trust that their panic about losing you will translate into actual transformation? Or do you recognize this as a pattern where they only show up when you pull back and will likely retreat again once you re-engage? This reflection invites you to consider if someone only values you when they think they're losing you. Is that the foundation you want to build on? There's also the possibility that your absence has given you perspective you didn't have when you were immersed in the dynamic, that the space between you has allowed you to see things more clearly, to recognize patterns you were too close to see before, to understand ways this connection wasn't actually serving you, even though you wanted it to realize that maybe what you miss isn't them specifically, but the idea of them, the potential you saw in them, the relationship you imagined rather than the one you actually had. And if that's what your absence has revealed, if stepping back has shown you that maybe this person isn't actually what you want or need, then their sudden increased interest might feel more like confirmation that you made the right choice than temptation to reverse it. Because healthy love doesn't require you to disappear for someone to recognize your worth. Healthy love shows up consistently. It doesn't need the threat of loss to motivate basic respect and effort. It may feel as though you're being tested right now, like the universe is asking, okay, you set this boundary, you created this distance, you chose yourself. Are you going to maintain it when it gets uncomfortable, when they start paying attention, when they start giving you crumbs of what you wanted all along? Or are you going to fold the moment they show the tiniest bit of interest because you're so starved for their validation? And that's a real question, because it's one thing to set boundaries when someone is actively disappointing you, when the pain of staying engaged exceeds the pain of pulling back. But it's another thing entirely to maintain those boundaries when the person starts changing, when they start showing up, when they start offering you glimpses of what you've been wanting. That's when your resolve gets tested. That's when you find out if your absence was a manipulation tactic to get them to behave differently or a genuine reclamation of your energy and self-respect. Some of you might be feeling vindicated, like finally they're seeing what they've been missing. Finally they're realizing I'm not going to wait forever. Finally they're understanding that I have options and I don't need to settle for breadcrumbs. And that vindication might feel good, might feel like power after feeling powerless for so long, might feel like justice after being undervalued and overlooked. But be careful with vindication, because if your goal in stepping back was to punish them or teach them a lesson or make them feel what you felt, then you're still giving them power. You're still making your choices about them rather than about you. And that's not actually freedom. That's just a different form of attachment. Real power comes when you step back because you genuinely choose peace over chaos. When you create distance because being alone feels better than being with someone who makes you feel small. When you redirect your energy because you finally understand your worth isn't dependent on their recognition of it. This reflection invites you to consider, are you stepping back to punish them or to protect yourself? And does that distinction matter? There's also something here about timing and readiness, about how sometimes people can't appreciate what they have until they lose it, can't value what's in front of them until it's gone, can't understand the gift of someone's consistent presence until that presence is withdrawn. And it's frustrating because you want people to recognize your worth while you're still there, while you're still showing up, while you're still offering yourself. You don't want to have to disappear for them to finally see you. It can seem as if this person needed your absence to finally do the internal work they should have been doing all along, to finally face their fears, to finally question their patterns, to finally get honest about what they actually want. And maybe that's true. Maybe your stepping back created the crisis that catalyzed their growth. But here's the question. If you come back, if you re-engage, will they continue that growth? Or will your presence allow them to relax back into old patterns because the threat of loss has been removed? Some of you are about to be approached. This person is going to reach out with new energy, new clarity, new willingness to be vulnerable or direct or committed in ways they haven't been. And they're going to say things you've been wanting to hear. They're going to make promises or confessions or declarations. And in that moment, when they're finally giving you what you've been asking for, you're going to have to decide if you believe them, if you trust that this change is real, if you're willing to risk being disappointed again. And there's no right answer. You could choose to give them a chance to see if their awareness of almost losing you has genuinely transformed how they show up, to believe that people can grow and change and become capable of things they weren't capable of before. And maybe they have. Maybe the shock of your absence was exactly what they needed to finally get their act together. Maybe this time will be different. Or you could choose to protect yourself, to recognize that patterns are hard to break, and that someone who only shows up when you pull back is revealing something important about their capacity for sustained effort. To understand that you deserve someone who doesn't need the threat of loss to motivate basic decency and respect. to decide that your peace matters more than the possibility that they might finally become who you needed them to be. And both choices are valid. Both come with risk. Giving them another chance risks being hurt again. Maintaining your boundaries risks missing out on a genuine transformation. And you won't know which risk was worth taking until you've lived with the consequences. So you have to make the choice that you can live with, the one that honors what you know about yourself and what you need and what you're actually available for right now. This reflection invites you to consider, what evidence would you need to see to believe this person has genuinely changed, and over what time frame? There's something about self-respect that's at the center of all of this, because your absence, your boundary setting, your choosing yourself, that was an act of self-respect. That was you saying, I matter enough not to accept crumbs. I'm valuable enough to require reciprocity. I deserve enough to walk away from what doesn't serve me. And that self-respect, once you've tasted it, once you've experienced what it feels like to choose yourself, it's hard to go back. It's hard to re-engage with dynamics that require you to minimize your needs or accept less than you deserve or perform for someone's conditional affection. So even if this person has changed, even if they're genuinely showing up differently, you have to ask yourself if re-engaging with them would require you to abandon the self-respect you've been building. Would it mean going back to patterns that diminished you? Would it mean forgetting the lessons your absence taught you about your own worth? Would it mean prioritizing their transformation over your own peace? It may feel as though your absence has created a crossroads. One path leads back toward this person, toward seeing if the changes they're demonstrating are sustainable, toward giving the connection another chance now that they seem to understand what's at stake. The other path leads forward without them, toward continuing to build the life you've been creating in their absence, toward maintaining the boundaries that have brought you clarity and peace, toward staying available for connections that don't require your disappearance to recognize your value. And you're the only one who can decide which path is right, which path honors you, which path serves your highest good rather than just your loneliest moments or your hope that maybe this time will be different. Because both paths have merit, both paths require courage, both paths will teach you something about yourself and what you're capable of and what you're willing to accept. Some of you might find that your absence worked too well, that this person is now so attentive, so present, so eager to prove themselves that it feels overwhelming, that the intensity of their pursuit is creating pressure you're not comfortable with, that you've gone from being the one who cared more to being the one who's less sure. And that reversal, while validating in some ways, might also reveal that what you wanted wasn't actually this person. It was mutuality. It was balance. It was being met. And now that they're offering that, now that they're showing up with the energy you used to bring, you might realize you've moved on. That the person who needed their validation doesn't exist anymore. That your absence changed you as much as it changed them. And if that's true, if you've grown beyond needing what they're now offering, that's okay. That's not failure, that's evolution. That's you becoming someone who doesn't need external validation to feel worthy. Someone who doesn't need to be chosen to feel valuable. Someone who's comfortable being alone, because being alone is better than being with someone who doesn't consistently show up. This reflection invites you to consider Who have you become in this person's absence? And does that version of you still want what the old version wanted? There's also practical wisdom here about attachment and availability, about how the more available you make yourself, the less someone might value that availability, about how scarcity, whether intentional or not, creates perceived value, about how people often want most what they can't easily have. And while that's a somewhat cynical view of human nature, it's also often true. We take for granted what's always there. We appreciate what we have to work for. We value what we risk losing. Um, and maybe that's what your absence has taught this person, that you're not always going to be there, that your patience has limits, that your love, while real, isn't unconditional in the sense of accepting any treatment, that they actually have to show up, have to reciprocate, have to demonstrate through action that they value what